Loading program, Trekommendations.
Hello and welcome to Trekommendations, the Star Trek podcast that finds fabulous guests to come on and share something they love in the greater world of Star Trek fandom, and also just have a fun conversation. Today we have the pleasure of being joined by Rob from the Beverly Crushers. Hello, Rob.
Hey, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. It's interesting to hear you talking and not singing, so that's
Yeah.
yeah, and you've got a beautiful voice for, I was gonna say for radio, but like for podcasts and stuff as well. So,
Oh,
you
thank
know,
you. That's very nice of you to say.
and I always appreciate when you've got a nice big microphone and headphones and things like that. I'm like, oh, good, this recording hopefully will come out well and sound good. And I notice a number of guitars behind you, so feel free at any point if you want to sing your answers, just go and grab one of those.
Sounds good.
Now, before we move on to the calibration questions, people get sick of this, but again, I'm just going to say, guys, it's me against the algorithm. I need your help. So please like, comment, share it, do all of the things you need to do to boost this up. I've said it before, but Trekommendations was a clever name because it was Star Trek recommendations. I merged the two. It works, but Google loves to autocorrect Trekommendations Star Trek to recommendations for Star Trek, and it finds you other podcasts and not this one. So I need all the help I can get. But now let's move on to some calibration questions.
Calibrating.
So, Rob, I always like to ask my guests a simple question, first of all, which is your favorite Star Trek show.
Yeah, this is an easy one for me, Jason. I grew up on The Next Generation, and so that is really my home base. I watched that along with my family in its initial run, and that's always been my favorite.
So I'm going to ask if you, and I feel like I'm leading the witness a little bit here, but similar to you, that was my introduction into Star Trek. That's what I grew up. I was born in '87, so that is exactly the right time. My mum, if she had to pick her favorite Star Trek, it would be Next Generation without a shadow of a doubt. Like nothing else would have come close. I feel like, and let's put aside all the new Trek stuff for now, but when I think about Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, even though I know it's not really the case, I can't help but think of Deep Space Nine and Voyager and that as spin-offs of Next Generation. I'm like, I know they're their own shows and they ran for as many seasons and like arguably incredible, and like I know a lot of people Deep Space Nine is their favorite show, and I would say that it's definitely one of my favorites and I love it, but there's something in my brain that is like Next Generation is Star Trek and these two are kind of spin-offs of Star Trek. Like
Yeah. Well, by the technical definition of spin-offs, Deep Space Nine is a spin-off
yes.
of Next Generation. So I think that's not unfair. I think it grew. That's an example of a show that grew into something that had its own tone and its own approach to the thing. But I think, particularly in those early seasons, of course, it was building on not only the success of Next Generation, but also on the tone and overall approach to the subject matter.
Yeah. But I do like the confidence you came in with your answer. Without a shadow of a doubt, it was this one.
Sure.
Yeah. It's the one. So my son has I've never really got him into Star Trek. Do you know what's funny? I just randomly showed him like one of the JJ movies the other day, and he did not like that because it was just too action heavy. And he actually said, "Can we go back to watching?" Because we had started Next Generation, so we're moving through season 1, and he was like, "Can't we go back to Next Generation? That's better." So, yes, that's my project at the moment. It's a long running project, but I'm trying to get him through Next Generation.
I think Star Trek overall has been handled pretty well as an IP in the sense that I think it's smart for these extended universes, which are now quite common, to take more tonal chances and to try to create different kinds of content. So in other words, it makes perfect sense to me that J.J. Abrams made effectively an action movie.
Yeah.
Or kind of a blockbuster that didn't really have much tonal connection to the other Star Treks. It had the characters, obviously. And I think in the reinvention of Next Generation and from then on, they are they're positioning it as a different kind of show. So to me, that just makes it feel a little bit fresh.
Yeah.
You don't just want to rehash the exact same approach to what it even means to be a show or the type of show you're making.
Yeah. I just find it interesting as, he'll be 13 this year. So I would have felt, oh, the younger generation, this is going to be more your thing. And
Sure.
actually, I was wrong. I miscalculated. That's
Interesting. Yeah.
okay. I have a question for you, but I need to build it
Sure.
up first. So, how many members are there in the Beverly Crushers?
Yeah, it's a four-piece band for any of the live shows, but we do bring in other musicians on the recordings because this has been primarily a recording
Yeah.
project all the years that we've been together, partly because we're geographically distant, partially because we just love recording. So we've had other horn players, other singers. We had a separate drummer come in and play with us on a few tracks, but really it's a four-piece, I think is the answer to the question you're asking.
Okay, and that will make this easier for you then. If you were to build a four-piece band with any characters from any season of or series of Star Trek, who do you think would be the best dynamic to stick together to have as a band? Which four characters?
As a band, like
Yeah,
a musical band,
a
not,
musical
for
band.
instance,
Yeah.
an away team, right?
No, I wonder how different do you think the dynamic needs to be between an away team and a band?
Actually, that's a great question. I think they both need very clear leadership hierarchy. That's where I think the world of bands has to be kind of similar to the military. It's not a democracy, nor should it be. You need someone in control, and you need people to follow orders to a certain extent, even though you're all in this endeavor together.
Are,
Well,
are
look,
you the leader, Rob?
I am the leader. Yeah.
Yeah. Do the
And
other members of the band know you're the leader?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. This
Absolutely.
isn't
It's not
ending the Beverly Crushes right now, is it?
no, not at all. I think that anyone who's been in bands for a little while, we usually start that process when we're teenagers, but after you've done it for a bit, you've gained some experience. What you realize is somebody needs to be the driving force. Somebody needs to be scheduling the practices, booking the shows, writing the material, organizing in the room when you're rehearsing how things go. And more than that doesn't mean everyone else can't have a say. It doesn't mean it has to be a dictatorship. But in general, I think if you were to examine any band throughout history and read some interviews, you'd quickly figure out who the leader was.
Yeah. Okay. So are we picking? Do you? Now this is interesting here because do you think it would work best then in our hypothetical band made from within Star Trek that you pick someone who's already like a commander, so you get like a Riker being in
Hmm.
charge of the band, or would it be a more interesting dynamic that it's some, an ensign or a junior lieutenant, but in the band they are the commander, they are the captain, even though they've maybe
Interesting.
got a higher ranking officer in their band?
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be. Well, actually, okay. So playing off that, why don't we put Picard and Riker in the band? First of all, they both play instruments. Picard's got his little
His little flute
tin
thing.
whistle
Yeah.
from his time in the Inner Light. Riker, of course, an accomplished trombonist, jazz player. But I got to assume Riker's going to take the lead musically. He's a lot more schooled in what's going on. So it's his opportunity to take the captain's chair to a certain extent and play against their normal hierarchical positions. I think that'd be nice for him.
Right. Who are you adding to fill out this band then? It's a great
So
first two.
so I'm going to stick with next gen. Let's round it out with some other I like technical ability in bands. So I'm going to add Data to the band.
Right.
He has exhibited that he can play he can probably play whatever he sets his
Yeah,
mind
I
to,
think so.
right? With quite a bit of proficiency, but I know he practiced violin for a while.
That's true.
So now we got quite an interesting mix. We got trombone, we got tin whistle, and we got violin. And
I
then
do have to ask a question. I'm just,
sure,
I
yeah,
don't want to mess up the dynamics of the band, but
of course.
when I think about jazz and how kind of free form and it's kind of the music that doesn't follow the rules. They
Mm,
like to be very expressive and kind of change things up. And I think
true.
of Data as somebody that would be like, no, this is the way this piece was written. and I will play it without a fluctuation in any way if I play it 100 times. Do you feel we'd get any kind of conflict between him and Riker?
It could be a good kind of creative conflict, though. I think it's a common fallacy that jazz is constantly free form. It's not quite that. What jazz does or seeks to do is to establish a framework via a particular song, which has a structure and a melody, and play around with it and make it a little bit flexible. I have a feeling Data would be good at that. I know what you mean,
Okay.
that he's probably more used to practicing classical pieces where he sight reads off of the page and plays it exactly as written without much interpretation. I think Data would see that as a good learning opportunity for himself, just to flex a little bit. And let's be clear, all the great jazz musicians have studied, many of them have studied the classics, right? And practiced scales and the so-called rules. You have to practice the rules quite extensively before you can break the rules and sound good at all.
Okay. We've got 3 out of 4 now. I mean, you can either insert yourself into this band, or let's round it up with a 4th person and just don't say Spot.
I'm going to get some feminine energy in there, and I'm going to add our band's namesake, Dr. Beverly Crusher.
Right.
I feel like she's got soul. She'd be a great front to the band. She's good looking, of course. She's got the red hair. She's striking. Let's do it.
So she's singing, I guess, then at this point.
She's singing. Yeah,
sweet.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are we putting Data on violin in the end, or he's just going to be like a multi-instrumentalist? It's just whatever's needed at the time.
I think, if I was assigning roles, I'd put him on drums. I think he'd be a good drummer. Drummers got to be the backbone of the band. They have to be solid. They have to be rhythmically in the pocket with consistency. But I feel like that's a good role for him for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so intrigued to hear one of these songs from this band is drums, a tin whistle. I don't think
be wild. Yeah.
Yeah. You need to find some way of amplifying that whistle. Otherwise he is drowned out. But
true. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I feel like AI, this is what the AI engineers should be working on. Is like, how do we create that with the snap of a finger?
There we go. Yeah. We'll just get Q to come and do something. Okay. Good. I mean, it's full disclosure. I am not a musical person. I listen to podcasts when I'm out on a run or driving my car or things like that. Pretty much the times that most people would listen to music, I'm listening to a podcast or an audiobook. That
Fair
being
enough.
said, the rest of my family love music. Music is playing all the time. Songs are always on. My kids both love singing. They get, complimented on their singing when they sing places and stuff. And I don't know where they get it from, because it's definitely not me. So it's their mother. It's their mother. That's where they get it from. I know that. But yes. So, but I'm happy that I'm able to kind of keep pace. But you are clearly an expert on all of this. Which leads me into my final calibration question for you. And I'm sticking with the musical theme.
Sure.
Obviously, at the moment, kind of Star Trek is wrapping up with everything that we've seen so far. We've got 2 more seasons of Strange New Worlds and maybe another season of Academy that's been filmed. And then who knows what. If you were to pitch an idea for a Star Trek musical, full on, theater production musical, what would it be?
What would it be? Man, that's a tough one.
I know.
Well, I'll default to one of my favorite next gen episodes, which I think, frankly, is better than some of the movies, which is Best of Both Worlds, the 2-parter, where Picard becomes briefly Locutus. I think there's a lot of great potential in that.
Yeah.
For songwriting, for drama. There's kind of that. There's a clear 3-act structure. It's about something. It's, philosophically, it's about what it means to be human, what it means to be on the side of the Federation, etc. And what I'd like to explore even a little bit more, if I was going to dive into that, would be, and the show has explored this a bit, it's like, in what ways is the Borg putting something out there that's kind of positive? Like, in what way would that be helpful? I don't feel like we get quite enough of the Borg's perspective. I know they don't exactly have a perspective, but I think there's an argument for the Borg. Let me put it that way.
Which I think would lend itself to a musical, in the sense that you know, in an episode of Star Trek, or even in a movie, people aren't, you get a captain's log, you'll get a bit of a conversation between people, but people aren't usually expressing like what they really feel about a situation. It's whereas in
Sure.
musicals you have those opportunities that there will be a whole song that is why I feel this way, or why I'm acting this way, or something like that. And yeah, having and I guess you'd have real jarring kind of styles of music if you've got, you're on the
Yeah.
Enterprise and it's a Starfleet vessel and a song there, and then you're in a Borg cube and there's who knows what's going on there. But
Great
yeah,
opportunity for a lot of, I feel like, musicals. I'm not super well versed in musicals, I should have said, but a trope is to have a choir of people
mhm,
responding to something that's happening, a whole bunch of people singing at once, and the Borg and that whole setup of them being a collective feels like
yeah,
a cool opportunity for that.
yeah. I think it's a very good answer for what was a pretty tricky question just coming out of nowhere. So I'm very impressed. And you know what? Paramount, CBS, I always say this, but look, we're here. We've got ideas. So
Yeah.
no one
Well,
else is doing this. Run with this.
well, this is where I think it must be remarkably hard to control this IP. Let's acknowledge it. But I would say, my advice to the people who do control this IP and are thinking about what to do next is take bigger swings and accept that not all of them will be home runs. And that's
Mm,
sort of okay. But I would rather, when I look at someone who's handling my beloved characters or my beloved universe, I would rather they try wilder ideas and have some of them fail, or maybe even a lot of them fail, in hopes of getting something truly original and new out of it.
yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because like studios don't want to do that. They what they love is a formula that they can repeat. But what
Hmm.
happens is, and you look at like the Marvel movies are a brilliant example of this, is that they found this formula and it worked, and they just copy and pasted it film after
Yeah.
film, and then the audience kind of caught on and was like, "There's no, yeah, they're all the same now. There's no point,"
Right.
and
Right. Right.
and interest sort of died off. Star Wars kind of a similar thing, and then they took quite a big swing when you think of something like Andor. It's just so different from anything else they'd done, and people were like, "Oh, this is really good. We really like this." So yeah, taking I think the lesson is, yeah, even if you think, oh, it's safe to just keep doing what's worked before, even that eventually kind of doesn't work anymore. So
No, it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable, absolutely. And I think even Marvel fans, I'm not the biggest Marvel fan, but even the fans will look back at the movies and say the ones they'll mention as being the best ones oftentimes will be the ones where they handed the reins to a director who had some kind of their own vision. For instance, the
yeah,
first Taika Waititi Thor movie
hmm,
felt really fresh and different. Yeah, it's following the basic
yeah,
formula and using the characters in kind of similar ways, but it had another person's imprint on it. The other one that it jumps out to me is like Winter Soldier, which had a little bit of that gritty 70s thing.
mm,
So you got to find, I suppose that is the challenge. Like for an artist working in this kind of medium, you have to find ways to put something, some kind of new stamp on it, while also hewing not too far away from the original. And to Star Trek's credit, I actually think they have been doing that
mm,
more recently with shows like Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks. Less so with stuff like Picard, although I enjoyed it. But yeah, so I agree. I understand why it's hard, but I think that the fan community has to accept that not everything will work. That's part of it, because the internet fan community can be quite harsh at
oh,
times. I don't know if you noticed.
yeah, yeah. I'd observed slightly, yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's where then you need to separate like like the loud minority and then the silent majority, and what's happening, and sometimes the loud minority are in line with the silent majority to a degree. So they might be
Hmm.
really vocal about a show not being good. And then you look
Hmm.
at kind of viewing figures and general audience or something, you're like, yeah, okay, actually, most people didn't enjoy that. And
Yeah.
sometimes they're really loud and angry about something. And then you look at the viewing figures and the general populace, and you're like, well, actually, a lot of people were watching this and they really enjoyed it. So I
You,
realize
you
you
know
didn't
what other
like it.
show most people didn't enjoy? The original Star Trek. So
That is
it's
true.
funny how this stuff works, right? Niche is a thing, and in a way, Star Trek created the
Mm,
sci-fi niche. The original
yeah.
Star Trek series, right? It was canceled, it went away. conventions and fanship sprung up in a pre-internet era, and it was like what, 10 years almost. And then Star Wars comes along and is a blockbuster movie, and they're like, wait a minute, we have this property. People
Yeah.
seem to like it.
I also do think there is some revisionist history a lot with Star Trek now, where people talk about, and actually I saw it even a Fred, and I think Will Wheaton had even commented on it, because people were saying about, how much the original crew were like the TNG crew were hated in the beginning because they weren't the TOS crew, and this person mentioned, people hated Picard, they hated Riker, they hated Data, and then Will Wheaton like responded saying, "Let me tell you who they hated." And I remember growing up and being like, people did not like Wesley Crusher. They
Sure.
like in general, and then recently, I've seen people talking about how, like when there's been complaints made about these kids that kind of know everything and can do everything. It's like, well, no one ever complained about Wesley Crusher. You all loved Wesley Crusher. And I was like, I don't think people loved
No.
Wesley Crusher when he was around. Like that definitely wasn't the case. But then at the same time, yeah, it sort of, it goes the other way, where it's like, oh, everything was good and we thought it was all amazing. And that's not the case. But I also think because there wasn't as much this, there wasn't this big online community like you have now. There was maybe a small online community and chat rooms and things like that. But like, I'll have conversations with people, or I'll listen to podcasts, I'll hear people talk about stuff. I will mention that, in a reel or in a little story that I'll put up or something. And the number of people that will come at me, be like, no one ever felt this way. Like, what are you talking about?
Oh, really?
I know people. I mean, recently there was one about, I thought, this is very off topic, but I was quite happy. So a character in Starfleet Academy that I had a bit of an issue with, or not an issue with, but like, oh, this is a bit weird, was Sam. The fact that they deliberately made her have like no life experience, and then be in situations like just handing over your operating system to somebody else to completely have control, like sound crazy, and then getting drunk in a bar and all of that kind of. And I was like, that all feels a bit weird when you think that she's only got a few months of. And people were like, the Doctor had only just been turned on, but the Doctor was programmed to have all this experience. She was deliberately programmed to like have no experience and to learn. And I felt it felt a bit uncomfortable to me. I was like, I don't know, like a 2-month-old hanging out in a bar with other people feels weird. And then they had the episode where, she gets those 17 years. And I was like, oh, that's really good. That's sort of solved what was to me a bit of a Kess problem, because I know people felt it was a bit weird, the Kess Neelix relationship, because of how young she was. Like, she was only kind of 2 years old and was treated very childlike on the show. And then there was this relationship. And the people that came at me with like, no one ever felt like that. No one ever had a problem with Kess and Neelix. No one's ever mentioned this. I was like, well, they absolutely have.
Ridiculous.
Quite a lot.
Yeah.
So
you're right. The internet is nothing if not revisionist history.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. They've all been reading 1984, and then they're like, oh, that's a good idea. We should do that.
And it's remarkably easy to do, I think, is your point.
Yeah, unfortunately. And I'm sure once again, AI is coming to the rescue and making that so much easier. Look, here's an article I found from the 90s. I was like, that was made yesterday on AI.
It's getting harder, yeah. It's hard to tell what's real, for sure.
Okay, Rob, we're going into Red Alert. Rob, leader of the Beverly Crushers, please, could you tell us in 60 seconds or less, what is your Trekommendation and why you brought it to the show?
Yeah, my Trekommendation is from a Tumblr blog, speaking of the ancient internet, that is still available, although not still updating, called Fashion It So. And it examines the costume design and rather forward-looking fashion choices of Star Trek: The Next Generation, which has made me look at the series in a brand new way. I mean, they're being a bit cheeky, but they're also truly complimenting what I think is excellent costume design throughout that series. It always looks both futuristic and retro, and they comment upon it in a modern way and talk about how you might go about procuring such an item or making such an item for yourself. So after reading Fashion It So, I never looked at Star Trek: The Next Generation the same way again. I found it much more visually stimulating, and you really realize how much goes into things behind the scenes.
Look at that. Amazing. Wow. Okay. A lot to unpack there, but very good. I mean, I
The
love
clock
that
was
it's.
helpful, Jason.
Was it helpful? Good. I'm glad.
Oh yeah,
So, well, some people
sure.
might feel it's
Got
adding
it in under the
pressure.
wire.
Yeah. Um, this is a great recommendation. This is, and I say this far too often, but like this, I feel was the point of this show, and it's why I vetoed very early on, like before it even began. Like, do not come on and recommend an episode of Star Trek because we all know what that is. We've all got access to Star Trek. We know what the shows are. We know what the movies are. I want niche. I want things that, you know,
Yeah.
basically. I mean, I think I said it to you before we started recording, but I came across the Beverly Crushers through Starship Tempest. That is a
Yeah.
which we recently had another member of the show on, Travis.
Nice.
If you listen to that
they're
one,
great. Yeah, they're great.
But like, and I don't even remember how I found them because I found Starship Tempest at the very beginning, like season 1, beginning of the show, and so I'm like, well, I don't know how I found that, but that's a great show, and I recommend that to people.
Mm.
And I thought I'd love there to be some way of doing that where people can share more niche or things that are just a bit more obscure that you won't find that aren't on the the main Star Trek pages. And this is, I mean, this couldn't be a better example of that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was a huge influence on why we made our super niche Star Trek The Next Generation band, the Beverly Crushers. I mean, I hear what you're saying. The internet, somewhat surprisingly, it's still quite challenging to get to these kinds of niche areas, people making their own strange Star Trek related content, right? I'm doing it in my band. Star Trek Tempest is doing it. Fashion It So was doing it early and often, and they were definitely an influence on me making my own weird Star Trek content.
Yeah. Well, I'm also intrigued by the way you said that it affected the way you look at, and we've already said that Star Trek Next Generation is your favorite Star Trek. It is for you, base camp of what Star Trek is.
Sure.
Okay. When did you discover Fashion It So? I guess that's the so I'm kind of curious as to know like how much time watching Next Generation pre this experience you had.
Oh, the entire run of Next Generation was done at that point. And I'm a little older than you, and so I watched Next Generation from the first season on TV in its original run.
Yeah.
And my parents enjoyed it, and I would watch it. I'd watched VHS taped versions of it in college and things like that. So I must have seen Fashion It So somewhere in the early mid 2000s.
Right.
Would have been somewhere around there, maybe 2007, 8, when I was living in San Francisco and I was kind of starting my adult life and my career and things like that. And so I was already really, really familiar with the show and had watched DVDs of it at that point and various VHS tapes where I paused out the commercials like we used to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was extremely familiar, but to me, it was a good example of what the internet was good at, which was drawing your attention to some new facet of something. And again, making it a little bit jokey, but also reverent. That line between jokey and reverent is an important line to me. Or another idea that is important to me in my creation of the Beverly Crushers songs, for instance, which are all about Star Trek characters and their inner worlds and lives, is to take something inherently silly and then treat it with dead seriousness.
Right.
I'm going to really dedicate myself to the craft of this thing, even though it's silly when I say it to someone at a cocktail party. I think Fashion It So takes a similar kind of approach.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm curious then, in your pre-experiencing this, in your many, it sounds like you've consumed many hours and hours of Next Generation.
Sure.
How much thought had you given to the fashion before someone was really shining a light on it?
Not a ton. I think I probably noticed the alien face makeup more. And if we would be joking about something as friends or even within my family about something a little silly on that we saw on the screen. It'd be more about, oh, just put a funky nose on that guy, and then suddenly he's from a far distant planet,
Yeah.
kind of thing. But and I noticed things like Guinan's hat collection.
Yeah.
Like some stuff jumps off the screen at you, right? Of course, I think the uniforms themselves are quite sharp. But
Mhm.
when you really get into how, first of all, the nature of the show was that they're dealing with different people, different actors every single week. So it's kind of like a Law and Order in space kind of situation, which meant that a lot of actors passed through Next Generation week over week. But then they have to design costumes for every single one of them.
Yeah.
And it is one of those things that can be easily overlooked, but someone made all that. Someone sewed that material every single week and made choices about it. So I suppose the answer to your question is no, I hadn't thought too much about it because I hadn't thought about costume design. I don't make clothes myself, just hadn't really been on my radar. And this was an example of bringing that to the forefront of my mind.
It does feel like one of those kind of thankless jobs where if you do it really well, it's almost like you notice it because that's not what I'm wearing. Like that's an alien wearing a weird thing. That's not what. But you also don't want it to be so noticeable that it kind of takes you out of
Sure.
the story, right? So I guess someone who's really good at their job is creating this, fantastic, completely unique, new, never before seen design with the intention of us kind of only paying partial attention to it because we don't want to distract from the actual story of what this alien is doing and why we're with them anyway. So,
Yeah.
and
It's a
then as you
great
said,
point.
but then
It's
somebody who makes cosplay is probably going, "Oh wow, like that, look at all those individual sequins. Look at this. Look at that. That's hours and hours and hours of work." And we're going,
totally.
"Oh yeah, alien. Okay,
So
hmm,
it's the story behind the story, to your point. And it's like you said, it's intended to be transparent, similar to the craft of acting.
yeah,
You're not supposed to be able to see someone acting. That ruins the illusion of them
hmm,
being the character. I think the costumes and things like the set design are similarly intended as transparent. If you notice them, that might be a mistake in a way
yeah."
because it takes you out of the story, like you said.
Well, yeah, no, like with the set design. I mean, you think of like TOS or something. Like normally, you notice it when a wall starts wobbling or something like that, and you're like, "Oh, well, that's not good." Um,
Right.
so, but yeah, when it looks real and just
You
a
just
part,
accept it.
yeah, you're like, "Oh, that's just part of the
Yeah.
the ship. Great, wonderful, moving on." Uh,
It's a version of virtual reality. I remember the first time I ever put the virtual reality goggles on and played some game. This was a few years ago now at a friend's house, and it was a cartoon archery kind of game.
right.
And I remember thinking that I was surprised at how quickly my brain accepted it
Yeah,
as normal. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Because it was good at tracking my eye movement and my head movement and things like that. And you just go, oh, this is the world now. I
yeah,
think that television and movies work in approximately the same way. You don't want to notice that they're fake or unusual, even. You're just in that world. You have a general suspension of disbelief. And the people who are producing the show, from the actors to the costume designers to the set designers, et cetera, to the sound designers, even, they're trying to leave you in that world and not disrupt that experience.
yeah. And as you said, like music is another thing, right? The episodes, shows, movies, they're full of music, and
Sure.
you people will go back and listen to like the musical score of a movie or a show later and just listen to it in isolation. But it's funny how they can strike that balance of stirring emotion, but without you necessarily realizing like, oh, that's happening to me, unless
Yeah.
you stop for a moment and think, oh, hold on, no, it's because that music's playing as that ship's coming into view. That's why. But yeah,
And
interesting.
being a musician myself, I have to say I don't think Star Trek The Next Generation has the most subtle of music cues. I think it's quite
No.
the opposite, actually, where, there's a general trope of the music tells you what to feel as an
Mhm.
audience. It tells you when to be frightened, it tells you when to be sad. And without music, you have to rely more on the writing, the acting, things like that. So I smile to myself every time I watch something like Next Generation, and it's typical of old shows
Yeah.
where every time they're going to commercial break, it's like da da da. It's very in your face, and that's just the way they did things back then. It's fine, but
and now you watch it on streaming. There's no break, so it's just
right,
sort of
exactly, yeah, odd
just
dramatic
interrupted.
pauses, right? Yeah,
That's weird. Yeah, it is funny. Yeah, it's like another conversation I have with my kids is things like just the access they have to shows, the fact that their shows aren't interrupted every couple of minutes with ads and stuff like, and and it just feels like a battle I cannot win to try and explain that like this.
no, they'll
You
never
didn't have just
understand.
a couple of channels and we could watch for a few hours maybe after school and that was it. And then it went to, shows that you didn't care about. And guess what? You just had to wait until the
Yeah.
next time that they came on.
I
Or yeah,
remember how, like, even if I say stayed home sick from school, there'd be
yeah,
very little programming for
yeah.
me,
No,
right? It would be daytime soaps, courtroom shows,
oh,
game shows in the morning. That was the most exciting time. But like there
yeah,
was nothing directed at me. So it wasn't, how do I put it? There wouldn't be a strong reason to stay
to
home.
stay home. No. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now they just like put Netflix on and stream for, you know,
Right.
the 8 hours I should have been at
Exactly.
school. Yes, it's not fair. Okay. I do think it's nice though that you found something that if other people go and check it out, and you could, yeah, because you can, I guess, rewatch the whole. You got 7 seasons to rewatch with a new perspective on. I'm just going to rewatch it and pull out details about the costuming and things like
Yeah.
that. Like, yeah, going into other. So obviously this one focused on the fashion and choices of Next Generation. Like when you've been watching any kind of the new Trek, do you pay more attention to what people are wearing now as a result, even though it's not stuff they've talked about, but just you've kind of got that
Yeah.
in your brain now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I worry
I
you've
think it,
infected me, but that's fine.
well, I think it follows a similar path to what I experienced with music. I started
Mhm.
when I was young, 10, 11, 12, as a music appreciator, and you listen to songs in one way. Then I started really caring about lyrics and trying to write poetry, and I started cueing in and listening to lyrics more. Then I started playing the guitar and I started listening to how people play their instruments. Then eventually I wrote music, recorded music, performed music, and you get all these new layers
Yeah.
to examine the thing as. And so when it comes to watching a television show or a film, it's very similar, right? If you go to
Mhm.
film school, you're going to the one of the main things you're going to be taught there is how to watch something,
Yeah.
how to quote unquote read the film. And that means all the details. Why did they choose the framing that they're choosing for this particular shot? Why is the camera angled that way? And what is going on with the costume design? And what is going on with the actors? And what about the actors you're not, who aren't talking right now, who are also in the frame? What are they doing? And what are they
Yeah.
thinking? So I see that as layers of an onion that help you appreciate art and craft on a deeper and deeper level.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask that. Is that something then that's a positive, or is it? Because sometimes it's nice to, but I do think there are those. You hear about like, oh, he's a comedian's comedian, and
Hmm.
the reason is because he's unpredictable. Like a comedian listening to another comedian will be like, yeah, that's funny, but I could see kind of 2 steps ahead where you were going with it, where you were leading me, and I knew it was gonna end up kind of here. And then you'll
Hmm.
have somebody who's very different and comes out with stuff, and maybe they're not, like, beloved by the major audience because they're a bit too quirky or a bit too unique. But for comedians, they're like, "Oh, no, this is nice for us because we know where it's going." And it's, similar, I suppose, with things like, magicians. They watch another magician, they're like, "Well, I know exactly how you did there's no magic there. Like, I know." And then they'll find somebody who's so good, so clean that maybe they can appreciate it in a different way.
Yeah.
Um, and with music, it's obviously like the way you're listening to it compared to the way someone else is listening to it is going to be different because all the mechanics behind. Someone else says that's a nice song. You listen to it and you're like,
Mhm.
well, that's a nice this, and this, and combined, a nice song. which can either, I guess it could be a positive or a negative, but I like that you're taking it as it's an extra layer of enjoyment. That sounds good to
Yeah,
me.
it's absolutely positive in regards to all the things that we learn to appreciate over time. I think our entire lives are like this, acquired
Yeah.
tastes, right?
Mhm.
I enjoy and am currently enjoying my morning coffee. And I've had a lot of coffee in my life, and I know how I like the coffee, and I can be discerning about really crappy coffee and good coffee. So it's that's a similar kind of discernment, right? I like to think about it when it comes to art, as you mentioned that some people who are really in the art form just want to be surprised. They
Mhm.
want their expectations subverted. And absolutely, I feel that way, right? You watch enough television, movies, you listen to enough songs, you have a pretty good idea of how they're going to go.
Yeah.
There's nothing inherently wrong with that, by the way.
No.
But it is exciting when your expectations get subverted. That's like an exciting moment. So it's possible that over time that becomes more of a rarity,
Yeah.
right? Just the more things you consume. But it does not, it's only one layer, it's one frequency of
Mhm.
enjoyment, I would say. There are other types of enjoyment. I can also enjoy very much someone taking a very tried and true classic kind of story arc where I do know what's going to happen approximately and still executing it very well.
Yeah.
You know, you
And
can
and
still
then,
make an amazing pop song in
yeah.
2026.
Well,
Yeah.
I think there can also be like a degree of comfort in that, right? Because sometimes, like, it's nice to have expectations subverted, and as you said, it can be quite rare. But
Sure.
sometimes there's something also nice about familiarity and just knowing, oh, I like this, and I'm going to watch this or experience this, and I know the kind of, I can see the direction it's going in. I know the beats, and I mean, we go back to the coffee, like. It's nice to, you quite often go out and someone will be like, we've got a new blend of this, or we've got a new this type of, and you're like, should I try it? Oh, I'll try it. And then you have it. And sometimes it's nice, but sometimes you're like, you know what? I know how I like my coffee. I should have just had that.
Yeah,
Like, well, I don't
sure.
always need to try new things. How do you have your coffee, by the way? I feel like this is an important question to.
Well, it's drip coffee, filter coffee
Very
that
good.
I make myself, and then I add a little bit of milk. That's all.
Okay.
Nothing crazy.
No, that's, hey, I'm a black coffee, no sugar kind of guy. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm coffee black. That is
I
me.
haven't been able to get off the milk yet, although I have some European friends who laugh about the fact that I like filter coffee and they call it sock water.
Right. Yes. Well, I've got we've got a machine that grinds the beans and then pours that in. And so we're not coffee snobs, but I did live in
Yeah.
Italy for 10 years. So I was,
Nice.
I was given an education in coffee. And
Excellent.
I used to work with someone that his opinion was if you added anything, and he felt this way about tea as well, but it was like, if you add something to it, you've
Yeah.
ruined it. So
Yeah.
I went from drinking like coffee with sugar and milk to then getting rid of the sugar, but I still needed the milk just to make it palatable enough, and then eventually removing the milk, and now I'm just a black coffee, no sugar, which is great. But I tell you what, if someone offers you a coffee and they make you a black coffee, you usually have to wait quite a while before you can drink it because it's so
Right.
hot.
Right.
So
Right,
that's a
right.
problem.
And
Anyway,
I would say I agree with your friend's general
mhm,
opinion, and maybe I'm on the path to eventually appreciating black coffee. And of course, if I go out to a nice coffee place and have an espresso, I mean, I love
yeah,
espresso.
yeah,
When it's done well, coffee with nothing else in it can be amazing. The truth is, I think I'm at a place where for my home coffee, I'm taking some shortcuts and I'm sort of okay with them,
yeah.
you know?
But it's interesting because I go like link it all back to what we said before is because there isn't, especially if you do just drink black coffee, it becomes very easy to identify where does good coffee and where
Yeah,
does bad coffee.
of course.
Once you start adding your creams and your syrups and your this and your that, it becomes much harder to identify who makes good
Sure.
coffee versus, good drinks. So you might think this is a delicious drink. The coffee portion of it, though, on its own is probably not very nice. Um, and somehow that relates to all the other stuff we've been talking about. That there obviously are people that can throw in
Layers,
so many
acquired
different things
tastes.
that go, "Oh, yeah, this is great because they've done
Yeah.
this and they've done that, and they've just," but then you're like, "Well, actually, the thing it's supposed to be is lacking maybe, like, all the other stuff is." I suppose it would be like an amazing music video, award-worthy music video over a pretty bad song and instruments
Mm.
aren't played very well, and you'd be
Oh,
like,
sure. There's
yeah,
plenty of
that's
those.
incredible, but the actual, yeah, what it's
Well, I'll
meant
go
to
even
be,
farther. Sometimes for fun, I like to, even though it's not really my genre, I check in on the biggest number one hits in
right?
pop music because I'm just curious what people are listening to in the world. And what you find is you find a mix of things. Some things that are really good craft, I have complimentary things to say about several of the songs that have been popular, and other stuff, which is, for lack of a better word, polishing a turd. You take material that is just not good at its
Yeah,
baseline, but you add all this sheen and production and harmony and reverb and all this random stuff, and now it becomes a hit song. But there's nothing there. It's just air.
this is, and all of this has come from being intrigued by the fashion of Star Trek. So that's,
Yeah.
and adding that, it's just another layer that you've added to your many layers of analysis through life. It doesn't always stand out to me, but the one that really jumped out was, and I suppose spoilers for Starfleet Academy if people haven't watched Starfleet Academy, but Jake Sisko's appearance
Mm.
and what he was wearing looked like it just felt Deep Space Nine. Kind of the style of clothing, you were like, I could see Jake wearing that, walking around the promenade wearing that. That absolutely fits the
Right,
vibe,
right.
and that's one of the few times that it's really kind of clicked with me. Oh,
That each show has its own
yeah,
aesthetic.
yeah. I think maybe just because it stood out so, it was such a contrast to what everyone else was wearing around there, sort of thing. So
Right.
it is another element to. It's just another thing I'm going to have to start considering now, isn't it?
Nah.
As I,
Well, generationally, it's also, I mean, if you're thinking about it like real life,
yeah,
older generations wear some different stuff than younger generations too.
yes,
Yeah, it makes you wonder. They probably do at this point have a large costume closet of all that old stuff, like they could have pulled
hmm,
from some of the production gear from Deep Space Nine.
yeah.
It's possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are. I know even my mum's got a book all on the costuming of different Star Trek shows and stuff. So
Yeah.
that stuff's got to be somewhere, right? Like
Yeah, and let's,
we can't have
don't
auctioned it all off.
I think, back to your question of did I notice it before this? Yeah, I mean, I noticed it to a certain extent. I think part of why Star Trek has endured is because of some of its aesthetic
Hmm.
branding, the way that the logos and the color scheme that is internally consistent, right? Or will it
Yeah,
change between shows a bit, right? But the blue, red, and yellow aesthetic, which again matured and evolved into some slightly different hex tones over time, is powerful. It's a
yeah,
powerful concept of branding.
yeah. Well, I'm on record of like if I'm, doing not so much doing a podcast, but if I'm sort of at my desk doing something and I'm doodling, and then I look down at that pad, the number of deltas that are going to be appearing on that pad where I'm doodling is, it's just a default kind of little thing that you just, I just draw that little thing there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, Rob. I've been enjoying this chat so far. So thank you so much for your recommendation. We are going to now just move slightly into the incoming transmission portion of the show.
Incoming transmission.
This is where, if you want to get in contact with me, you can email trekommendations@gmail.com. You can leave comments on the videos. So if you want to give some feedback on some of the things we've talked about on this episode, and then maybe we'll mention it in a future one, that would be nice too. Um, I'm doing really well in recording a number of episodes in a row, which is really good for me. It does mean it's harder and harder to then find stuff that people have talked about because there will be a big gap between when the episodes are going out and when I'm recording them. But I have pulled up some nice comments from a recent episode with Weather Katie and her recommendation of Star Trek and Chill. Just people basically backing up what she said. So Richard's Final Frontier. I'm a frequent viewer of Star Trek and Chill. Love the vibe every Friday evening. Um, she was from South Dakota. We talked about lockdown and her being trapped in South Dakota, and that's maybe why she loved Voyager so much, because she felt that
Mm,
isolation.
sure.
Um, so Joel and Valley Sock said South Dakota is indeed the Delta Quadrant of the U.S. Glad Katie made it home. So and then yeah, and also and the transporter room was commenting on Katie's 7-hour nap that she was able to take, which to me feels like a night of sleep at that point, but apparently it was a
Yeah.
nap.
Yeah, where
So
is the line?
yeah, so thank you for those comments, everyone. And if, as I said, if you want to get in touch with me, leave some comments here. I'd love to hear your feedback on Rob's suggestion. Maybe maybe it's fashion first. Perhaps you only watch Star Trek for the fashion, and the story is it's just a nice little B plot thing for you to follow. Rob, the Beverly Crushers. If people
Yes.
want to find your music, to see what you're doing, like where can they go? Where can they find you? I know you've also hinted at live shows and things like that. So
Yeah. We play live every once in a while. We're playing pretty soon here. So we're based in Northern California, San Francisco Bay Area. So far we've only played live shows here. We have 2 full-length records. We're working on a third right now. Those first 2, which are called Sick Bay and Enterprise, respectively, are available on vinyl as well as CD and streaming everywhere. You could check out thebeverlycrushers.com. That has all the links. It'll take you to our Bandcamp store where you could listen or buy a copy of the vinyl or buy some other merch from us. We make posters, we make t-shirts, all with original Star Trek designs. I'm wearing my away team shirt right
nice.
now that I myself made. And yeah, so that'd be the best place to support us. But of course, we're on all the streaming platforms as well: Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. Check out the Beverly Crushers. There will be a picture of Beverly Crusher. That's how you'll know it's
Yeah,
us. And all the songs are original songs written about Star Trek The Next Generation characters, diving a little deeper into some of the themes behind the episodes, the philosophies, complaining about life on the Enterprise, what it's like to be the captain and have to manage a bunch of people, what it's like to have the captain get your name wrong if your name is Lieutenant Barclay and he's always calling you Broccoli, what it's like to be maybe a woman who is feeling relegated by the fact that of her gender and wants to more responsibility, as in a song like Just a Pretty Face. So we write about all those things, and it's a guitar group with, I think, lots of hidden fun Easter eggs, and made by a bunch of old pros, people who have been playing music their entire lives. So I dare say we know what we're doing.
yeah, good. Well, I'm glad you said it. I think you know what you're doing, but I've already come out as not being an expert on music. So
Yeah, yeah.
me saying you know what you're doing is nothing. But you
Well,
saying it
I
feels like
mean to say it is all professionally made and carefully crafted songwriting and productions. We go to the professional recording
yeah,
studio. It's all professionally mixed and mastered, printed to vinyl. Like I said, my aesthetic is to take an inherently a little bit of a silly idea when I tell people that I'm in a Star Trek The Next Generation tribute band. They get a certain look in their eyes
yeah,
out there in the world, but I treat it with a strong amount of reverence and dead serious musical craft behind it.
yeah. Well, I have listened to some of the songs, and yes, like the quality of the music itself is exceptional. Like no one's going to be listening to that going, oh, it's not that you held up a a recorder in the garage somewhere and we're like, oh, we'll just play it to that. Like it sounds amazing, and even me, who's not that big a music guy, I am a Star Trek guy, so I'm kind of enjoying the Star Trek side of it. But also, as much as I'm not a music guy, I'm much more a your kind of music guy than I am a lot of other styles of music.
Oh,
So,
okay, cool. Yeah,
because I didn't know what to expect,
sure.
from it at all. So when I started listening, I was like, oh, actually, this is more my style of music to listen to. So I was very pleasantly surprised by that.
Yeah, I would
Well,
say genre-wise, it's placed pretty squarely in the 1970s, which is
mm,
all of our wheelhouses. We're all classic rock fans,
yeah,
Beatles, Pink Floyd, some funk in there, but very generally a tour through the 1970s.
yeah. I think some of the cover design gives that away as well. When you
Yeah,
look at
yeah,
the artwork, it's not subtle. Um, you know what you're
yeah.
getting for. Okay, well, Rob, thank you so much for joining me for your morning coffee this morning, and also sharing a recommendation. That was also really important. Hopefully, everyone who I'm sure a lot of people knew about you already, but if you've never heard of them, head on over there, listen to the music, buy the vinyl, get some t-shirts, do all of that good stuff. And once again, I'll remind you, if you could just do anything to help boost this up the algorithm, I would appreciate that. But until then, I will be back next week with another guest and another Trekommendation.
Ending program.